We got this email, rad@radradio.com. It's from Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
We have Sheriff Scott Jones from Sac County here. Also, Deputy Lacey Nelson's here. This is not a surprising email. We get these all the time. Says, I don't have a question for the sheriff. I simply wanted to say thank you for your service. My husband went through the Sacramento Sheriff's Academy and was employed there for about 8 months while he finished completing his backgrounds at the agency he's with now. And we were both very impressed with Sheriff Jones and the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office.
Aww.
My husband's very thankful he learned from the best, and his top-notch education received in the Sac County Academy serves him well in his career. He's definitely a better deputy for it. Sac County Sheriff's Office is the cream of the crop, and I wanted to pass along our thanks and compliments to Sheriff Jones.
Wow.
Oh, well, I want to thank my wife for sending in that email. No, I appreciate that. That's very nice. Thank you.
We get a lot of that, and the other thing that I get a lot of when I am out on ride-alongs, after you, because you meet so many deputies when you're out on ride-alongs, because after whatever the call is, y'all stand around and talk, and man, your deputies like you a lot.
Oh, that's so nice.
They say nice. I mean, I give an opportunity. Like, come on, really?
Hey, you know what? I've always said my job is just to give folks the tools they need and to get out of their way. And I'm always amazed at the amazing work that all of them do.
Our phone number is 888-989-9811. We got a lot of questions here, rad@radradio.com. This is just a comment from David. Says, amen, Sheriff. I work in education, and like you said, I have never had less on my calendar and worked harder in my life.
Wow.
Like everyone else, education is changing daily, sometimes hourly, depending on state and county mandates. Here's a question from Jordan.
Hi, Jordan.
Says, I got a ticket back in February, and I was able to get 2 of the 3 things signed off, and I was told I have to get the proof of insurance signed off at the courthouse. Now the courts are closed, and I can't get it signed off. So what happens? Do I get charged the full amount because I can't pay it off?
No, my understanding is all of our, at least Sacramento County's, court cases, traffic has been put off. So if you had a trial for a traffic matter or any other traffic matter, I think those things have fallen off the calendar. They'll get pushed out.
Now, we talked earlier, but not everybody's listening all the time. People going in and out. In Sac County, you are not yet, with no plans to, as I understand it, punishing businesses that are remaining open that might be deemed unessential.
Yeah, we're not. We'd be several steps in. It'd be the health department or the county health officer, their office first, and if there needed to be some enforcement thereafter, after they were warned or acknowledged that they weren't essential, for example, then we might get involved in the potential enforcement, but that'd be a few steps down there.
We are hearing stories as far back as a week and a half ago from the Bay Area where they had shelter-in-place orders first in the counties of some officers going door to door. We're hearing stories of some fines, and this is a question from Galen. Says, is law enforcement really fining businesses for being open when considered non-essential? This is cruel. Warnings would be fine, but fining them, why not let the business come up with ways they can stay open by putting safety measures in place like grocery stores are doing, blah, blah, blah. I mean, if it got to the point where you were fining them, there would be a reason for it.
I'd be surprised if that was happening, and that brings up a good point. There's so much bad information being promulgated out there, and so much bad rumor control. I always hear about the National Guard. There's this text going around. I have a friend that's in Department of Homeland Security, and they're going to start establishing a curfew, and it's legit. I mean, it sounds legit by the time you read it. My wife got that text, and she was about to forward it on, and I told her, it was garbage, but well, I said it much more delicately than that. But nonetheless, they're out there, and it sounds convincing, and it's getting spread around. So I'd be surprised if any businesses, frankly, were getting fined by any law enforcement agencies, at least in California, as a first impression. It's a balance, right? What is essential versus, people keeping their jobs. So there's a lot of different factors in someone deciding what's essential.
I just look at, as a citizen, speaking to other citizens, can you please keep in mind that law enforcement is to enforce law. They don't make the law. So don't take it out on them if indeed that's happening or starts to happen. They're just enforcing what they've been told to do. Don't take it out on them. And we only have ourselves to blame as citizens if we're not doing what we're supposed to do.
I'm going to go out on a limb, Sheriff, and also Deputy Nelson. When we start talking about pulling people over just to ask them why they're out, which you're not doing yet, going to businesses and fining them for being open, this is not your dream job of law enforcement. This is not the calls you want to be going on.
Well, certainly not, and we certainly have better things to do, and it certainly wouldn't be our first introduction to that business or first introduction to that individual if we were to take some enforcement action. That business or that person would have had plenty of opportunities to have voluntary compliance with the orders.
All right, this is from Britt.
Hey, Britt.
Says, I want to become a police officer, and all this craziness going on makes it much more real. of what they and I will be dealing with. I just wanted to ask if you have any advice to fellow law enforcement officers and those of us looking to get into this career. I know every area and department are different. Any insight highly appreciated.
Well, I mean, just briefly, I think that if you feel the calling of law enforcement, and it truly is a calling, it's not just like a job that you want to try out. I think people are still drawn to it. Then go for it. Don't let anything stand in your way. It takes some time. Apply early. Right now, we've sent our academy home. And I think that's true in the state, that most of the academies have ceased, at least for the moment. But we'll pick up again. We run 3 academies a year. So there's still plenty of hiring going on, and it's still... despite all this, it's still an extremely noble profession.
I think you just answered this, but here's another one from Jason. Says, I want to serve the community. The sheriff mentioned they're fully staffed. Are they not accepting recruits or operating academies? You're not operating academies. Are you accepting recruits?
All the time. Like I said, we fill 3 full academies a year, 2 full-time and 1 part-time that's in the evening and weekends to accommodate folks that are working and can't quit their jobs. And we're such a large agency, we have just normal attrition. We have people retiring, hundreds of people retiring every year. So we are continuously hiring, and I think that's true of most agencies in California.
Here's another topic we've been getting a lot of over the last couple of weeks as the coronavirus news hits. This is a topic, as you know, Sheriff, that has been lingering in our area for years. Lots of people are focused on the homeless in a variety of ways. Are they more prone to passing the virus because of their living conditions? What are you guys doing about the homeless? And that was a question before coronavirus.
Yeah, right.
Has anything changed as a result of coronavirus, and what can you tell people about homelessness?
Sure. Well, we've always had homeless outreach teams, which are teams of officers dedicated to specific homeless issues, as well as armed with a bunch of different tools. If someone needs connection with services, housing, whatever, we can get that connection, make that connection for them. During this time of specific to COVID, I know the county health department has delivered hand washing stations. So you're right; they can't do everything that we could do. In fact, staying in our houses, they don't have houses. But they can do some things. So they're being educated. Number one, they're given the tools like hand washing stations. They're giving education about social distancing. They're trying to limit the size of homeless camps to 10 or fewer and maintaining those social distance aspects. And we are not really doing much enforcement in the way of homeless. We're certainly not enforcing someone for not being able to stay at home if they don't have a home. That's a big question we get, but we're not doing any enforcement in that respect.
Some of the people that wrote in about homelessness that I was reading over the weekend too they're looking forward. When we get close to being back to normal, whatever that looks like and whenever that looks like, 60, 90 days, a lot of people are very concerned there's going to be a lot more homeless people because of the state of our economy, et cetera. So if you go back in time before all this, last December, there was already a lot of controversy in our area about homelessness. And obviously you're at the mercy of, as Don was pointing out earlier, whatever you're being allowed to enforce.
Right.
When I ask you to project forward the homelessness in Sac County 6 months and what in the world it's going to look like or you're going to be doing about it, what's your best guess?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, the problem with the homeless is it's a difficult problem to solve. I don't know that it can be solved because there are different types of homeless, right? There's folks that we can all be empathetic with, folks like maybe through this COVID crisis might lose their job, lose everything, and end up homeless. For people that don't want to be homeless, there's plenty of resources out there in terms of trying to get people back into housing. So I'd like to see those continue. I would expect those services to be expanded. I know the state right now is looking at hotels and trailers on public lands. I think they're looking at putting trailers on our Cal Expo, our state expo center, to house homeless. So I think those efforts are already underway. This governor seems to be very attuned to trying to get at least some shelters for the homeless. But then you've got a bunch of other homeless issues. You've got some that are engaged in criminal activity. You've got some that have addictions of one sort or another. You have many with mental health issues. But the problem is you cannot get a one-size-fits-all approach to homeless because there are just many different kinds of homeless. So I would hope it was not too exacerbated by this crisis, but the folks that find themselves involuntarily homeless that don't want to be homeless, I'm hoping there will be enough resources for them on the other side of this.
One of the things that we get a lot on the show is the sexy, if you will, right, a side of it, which is pretty disgusting. And we should point out first, Sac County, you work as Sac County, but like, for example, the city of Sacramento has their own police department that they're more in charge of, say, Midtown,
right,
with homelessness. But a lot, the sexy, if you will, part of this is the human waste on the streets, and people will call and they'll be like,
I wasn't sure where you were going with that.
Why? Well, and the question,
and I'm disappointed where you ended up.
And I'm not even done yet. the question a lot of people have is, why isn't that a health issue that law enforcement can do something about? And I know there's an answer, but what's the short one?
So there's a couple of different issues. Number one, a police department's different than a sheriff's office, right? I happen to be elected, so I get all the say of what my department spends its priorities and resources on. A city police chief doesn't necessarily have that advantage, right? They are at they can get fired every Tuesday night at a city council meeting. And so they are somewhat at a little bit of the mercy of the city manager or the hiring authority, which is a mayor, city manager, or city council. And so there's politics, even though they're not a political position, there's definitely politics that inject themselves into the enforcement priorities for the police departments in the city. So that's why you'll often find a difference in the enforcement or the tolerance of things like homeless in cities versus counties.
And so, and I was going to ask this before, I'm glad you mentioned it. So who is your boss?
Well, my boss is, 1.5 million residents of Sacramento County, and they elect me every 4 years. I'm on my third term, and those are my bosses.
Is there anyone that in a political position that can order you to change your enforcement techniques? Can they say, Sheriff, you have to now start pulling people over?
So no, they can certainly, by the laws that they pass, they can change the manner in which we do business in that respect. But and certainly the Board of Supervisors, as I always say, I don't serve at their pleasure, but it's my pleasure to serve them. So if they have individual priorities that we can address, then we certainly do that. We have a great relationship with all of our board, with the Board of Supervisors. But they can tell me how much money I get. So in that respect, they do have the purse strings. But they can't say, look, we're going to give you an extra, we're going to cut you $1 million. This is what we want you to cut. So every decision on how the department runs is up to me.
Phone number is 888-989-9811. Hi, Linda.
Good morning.
Hi, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I know that I've heard you say a couple times that they are not enforcing being pulled over yet and asked questions, but 4 of our employees have been pulled over and asked what are they doing on the road. 2 were in company vehicles that are not wrapped with our logo. They were just plain white vans. And 2 were in their personal vehicles on the way to work. So they are, in fact, being pulled over, and this is in West Sacramento.
Okay.
West Sac, okay.
I was going to ask, and when was this in terms of date? Was it a few weeks ago, or was it recently? Or
Both of them were, all 4 of them were last week.
Okay.
And your understanding, Linda, is they were pulled over only to be asked why are they on their road. They weren't pulled over for speeding or something like that.
That would be my guess. I'm not exactly sure because I'm not in on the meetings when they're letting the boss know what happened. But yeah.
So I can't speak to other law enforcement agencies. I can speak generally for the CHP. I know they're not pulling over for that purpose exclusively. I know that there have been some people that have complained to me that my officers, for example, have pulled people over for that purpose. And when we track it down, it has been, just as Rob mentioned, that they're stopped for something else. And during the course of that conversation, they might inquire. And so it's easy for someone on the receiving end of a vehicle stop to say, hey, I was profiled because I was out and asking if I was essential or not.
And during that inquiry is where the education you were speaking of that might come in, where the deputy might say, well,
correct,
you need to go home.
From someone on a vehicle stop, they might perceive it, or the inference might be something different than what's intended by the officer. But generally, it's an education component if that topic does come up during a vehicle stop.
I pull you over because you're in an unmarked, creepy van.
Which, by the way, Sheriff, if you spend any time with Dawn, you'll realize we're all very thankful she has nothing to do with law enforcement.
Oh, yeah, I'd be a dirty cop.
So, music to your ears, right, Sheriff?
That's nice.
I would serve the public well. I'd be like a vigilante cop.
Okay, all right.
Phone number is 888-989-9011.
You're what we call a red flag.
A lot of people have been asking this, and I think it's just more of a general question. A lot of people want to know, what's your opinion, let alone the legality of just taking a motorcycle ride during this stay-at-home order? You're not supposed to leave, but you're on a motorcycle. You're just going to ride somewhere and ride back. What's your opinion of that?
So my opinion is I have no problem with that. I mean, I think from mental health standpoint, I've taken my kids to the park. You can certainly go outside and recreate. You just have to be smart about it and maintain social distancing. So, we've gone to a park and, thrown a ball around and just to get out of the house and kind of recharge those mental batteries. So I would certainly have no problem with someone taking a bike ride as long as they, didn't stop somewhere, as long as they used common sense. And it sounds like this person does.
Hello, Joe. Go ahead.
Hi, I was just calling. I live in West Sac, and I've seen West Sac PD multiple times this last weekend, and they are not pulling people over at all. I had one drive right by me. There was one right behind me.
Well, it didn't happen to
So
you.
I don't believe that they are pulling people over at all.
Okay, well, as long as you don't believe it, then it must be true. We also got this email, rad@radradio.com. This is from Kim.
Hi, Kim.
Says, I just want to say thank you for your service and dedication, keeping us safe. Appreciate all of you. My question is, why are some grocery stores like Rayleigh's getting officers stationed outside and others are not? Just curious.
So that's a great question. Early on in this, Rayleigh's in particular had the foresight to say, hey, look, we want to keep our customers safe. We want to enforce limits on certain items, and we don't want there to be disorder in this whole process. And so they reached out to law enforcement, not just us, but some of the other local Sacramento County police agencies, and said, could you please assign an officer to us? And of course, all of us were pretty consistent that we said, no, this is not what we do, and there's way too many stores, we can't do that. But we did direct them to what we have as kind of an off-duty program. So folks, like when you see cops at concerts and ball games and things like that, it's what's called off-duty. So it's additional employment, so it's an extra assignment. So they went through that program, Rayleigh specifically, and hired some officers for their stores through that. So they aren't taking officers off the street, and they are not being paid for with taxpayer money.
Sheriff, thank you so much for being
My
here.
pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. You're
Thanks
amazing.
for everything you do and for being
Yes.
well-spoken. And we're going to have Deputy Nelson stick around for another. Did she tell you she took over the whole show last
Hey,
night?
that's
So,
Do you see why I brought him this time?
yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just get to sit back and listen
yeah,
today.
well, we're going to put you to work on the other side of this break. Thank you, Sheriff.
thanks.
Rob, anybody, and Dawn.